On a quiet morning in the capital Paluma, in an alley hidden from the eyes of passers-by, a group of people suffered mistreatment. An elderly man with fair skin and white hair, with a whip in his hand, mercilessly beat those of lower status. They were the half-humans Ai and Han, beings with mixed human and demon blood, who looked very similar in appearance, distinguished only by small horns or a few unique markings. Even so, they were considered the lowest class of society, with almost none of the rights afforded to full humans. Most were forced to perform heavy labor and received no decent treatment. After an exhausting day of work, a young merchant named Banaza appeared, calm in appearance and with a kind manner of speaking. After inspecting his wares, he generously rewarded the porters with a little extra money for food. This gesture of kindness soon spread among those present, who commented that Banaza was too humane for the half-demons. Even those who had received the help were hesitant to accept it, but a young woman named Quen, wearing a vest, encouraged them to seize the opportunity, as the town's coffee shop was running a promotion where if you buy 2 coffees you get a third for free. After that, no one hesitated. The entire group left joyfully, full of gratitude. Some nearby merchants expressed displeasure at seeing Reinhardt Banaza helping what they called beasts, claiming he only wanted to create a good image. However, for Banaza, that brief moment was enough to warm his heart. He clearly understood that not everything could be bought with gold, especially empathy between different species. Suddenly, a strange light exploded and enveloped his entire body. The space around him immediately disappeared, replaced by an ancient summoning ritual. Before him stood a priest from the kingdom of Kriros, who announced that they needed a hero to save the country from the threat of the demon lord. Reinhardt, who had never wielded a weapon, felt everything was happening too suddenly. Soon after, the royal court held a test to assess his abilities. When the results were announced, the entire hall fell silent. The system merely confirmed that he possessed negotiation and arithmetic skills, useful only for commerce but useless for carrying the fate of a kingdom. In contrast, the person summoned after him possessed all the characteristics of a perfect warrior and was given the title of Hero of the Capital. Banaza, on the other hand, was nicknamed the Balcony Hero, a mocking title, devoid of any authority or responsibility. His wish to return to his former world was denied, as the summoning gate had been permanently closed. As a consolation, the royal family granted him a small plot of land in the Delbian Forest, a deserted region far from the city center. The only condition was that he not reveal anything about the failed summoning. The next morning, he quietly departed the capital. The coachman was a man of few words, but during the long journey, he revealed important information. He explained that half-humans were no longer considered slaves, though the prejudice had not completely disappeared. Before parting, Banaza received a sack sent by the royal family, along with a warning that the area showed signs of dark forces. Once he reached the designated territory, he opened the sack and found food, money, and some basic materials. However, within moments, monsters from all over began approaching. At that moment, the system activated itself and revealed that the bag was enchanted to attract creatures, a sophisticated trap. With just a few commands, Banaza was able to undo the spell, something beyond the capabilities of ordinary people. Soon after, the system informed him that the forest was contaminated with demonic essence, an energy that degenerated living organisms. Without hesitation, Banaza decided to purify the entire area. In the blink of an eye, an extremely powerful light surged like a divine tsunami and wiped away all traces of darkness scattered throughout the area. As the light faded, he noticed his body beginning to change strangely. All his attributes grew unabated, surpassing normal limits until they displayed only infinity. Alongside this unimaginable growth, new abilities successively emerged, such as transformation, instant teleportation, and instant spell learning. It was as if the system had unlocked his full hidden potential the moment it purified Delbia Forest. Realizing that his life in that world couldn't be temporary, Banaza decided to change his identity. He adopted the name Fenris and registered as an adventurer with a nearby guild. The ranking system was well defined, from E rank for beginners to S rank at the top. Once he completed the procedures, he encountered a girl desperately seeking someone to accompany her to Delbia Forest, a place no one dared visit because of rumors that monsters still roamed the area after the recent strange incident. Without much thought, Fenris offered to help, believing that a simple touch would be enough to teleport there. This attitude aroused suspicion among those nearby. A group of experienced adventurers led by the knight Balarosa appeared and openly expressed their suspicion, criticizing his boldness. To avoid a greater misunderstanding, Fenris invited the entire group to accompany him. When he teleported and whisked everyone out of the dark alley in an instant, astonishment gripped everyone. The atmosphere of distrust turned to admiration. Some apologized, and others bowed in gratitude. However, just as everything seemed to calm down, something unusual happened to the girl with them. The system appeared once again and displayed a stern warning that revealing information about the purification spell could have dire consequences if it reached the enemy. Soon after, Balarosa asked the girl to show her true form. What seemed like a mere mere test became reality when, in front of everyone, the girl transformed into a massive wolf with a demonic aura who introduced herself as Fen, one of the Demon Lord's 4 generals. Fen released a smoke laced with demonic essence that knocked all the adventurers unconscious. Only Fenris remained conscious and quickly teleported the others back to the safety of the city. He, however, decided to stay and face the creature roaring in the vast forest alone. Unaware of how many types of magic he possessed, he decided to test everyone against the wolf immediately. When the fight began, Fen waited for nothing and advanced at terrifying speed. Faced with that overwhelming force, Fenris cast a high jump spell to avoid the direct impact, nearly losing his balance but managed to steady himself. Immediately afterward, he cast an earthquake spell, raising the ground and creating a barrier resembling a miniature fortress. To counterattack, Fenris conjured a whirlwind inspired by ancient tactics, forming a giant vortex to envelop the enemy. However, Fen proved equally formidable, using short-range teleportation to narrowly escape and moving non-stop between techniques. The fight between Fenris and Fen continued intensely, with both unleashing magic that distorted space. In a moment of precise calculation, Fenris used gravity to create a zone of intense pressure that hampered his opponent's movements. The system then presented a list of suggestions like a tactical menu, including a dangerous spell that would allow the enemy to be transformed into a servant, stripping them of all their willpower. However, memories of the alleys of Paluma, where half-humans were tortured, made Fenris reject this option. This hesitation gave Fen more time to resist, releasing magical energy to break the gravity barrier. Even so, she began to weaken as her life force drained. In the end, with no more strength left, Fen had to accept defeat. Seeing that her enemy had no more power to fight, Fenris chose to stop. He considered all lives equally valuable, regardless of race. This decision shook Fen. Instead of maintaining hostility, she reverted to her true form as a young woman with white hair and a frail body, before collapsing from exhaustion before him. Ryuta silently placed his coat over Fenris to keep her warm, then lit a fire and began reviewing all his skills. As dusk approached, Fenris awoke and found herself being cared for. She wore new clothes and her eyes were filled with emotion. Wordlessly, she knelt before Ryuta and declared absolute loyalty, promising never to harm anyone again. Although Ryuta tried to refuse, Fenris remained steadfast, even crying when she felt she was not being accepted. To avoid further problems, Ryuta ended up allowing her to remain by his side, imposing only the condition that she fulfill her promise of peace. As the night wore on, they sat together around the fire. Ryuta told him about his past, explaining that he had been merely a merchant dragged into that world. Realizing he was hiding nothing, Fenris smiled. For the Fanged Wolf tribe, loyalty was sacred and could not be rejected. Regardless of the master's form, devotion was maintained to the end. A month later, in the capital of Kryros, the atmosphere within the royal palace grew tense. The army accompanying the capital's hero on his campaign against the Demon Lord had been utterly defeated. When questioned, the self-proclaimed hero did not hesitate to blame the soldiers, claiming they were incompetent and that he had had to bear the burden alone. The king hesitated and asked the captain to verify the facts. The truth shocked the entire court. In the first battle, the capital's hero had been the first to flee, abandoning his soldiers to fight in despair. Furthermore, even after many days of training, he hadn't shown any progress. His stats hadn't changed, and he hadn't even learned a single new spell. He couldn't even handle low-level monsters. Meanwhile, Ryuta and Fenris were building a simple life in a small town near the border. They roamed the streets looking for a living and mingling with the locals. Once, while buying vegetables, the stall owner misinterpreted the situation and believed they were husband and wife, then began treating them both with warm sympathy. This misunderstanding gave Ryuta an idea. If the two pretended to be a couple, they would avoid many unnecessary complications. Simply stating they were husband and wife would be enough to stop others from asking any further questions. Fenris was extremely enthusiastic. She not only accepted it but also showed evident pride, raising her hands and wagging her tail as if she had received the greatest honor of her life. For her, whether faked or not, being bound to the strongest man was already destiny. That day, Ryuta and Fenris returned to the Adventurers Guild to register as members. Fenris looked excited, feeling they had just sealed a ritual connection. For the Fanged Wolf tribe, sharing half a bone symbolized a lifelong bond. When the time came to name them, Fenris nearly revealed his true identity, but Ryuta intervened in time and asked them to use nicknames to protect their lives. Just then, an urgent mission was announced. A group of monsters was approaching the city, and the reward was more attractive than usual. Despite Ryuta's hesitation, Fenris dragged him to the battlefield. They soon found the group of warriors they had met before, surrounded by demonic bears. The red-haired warrior named Balirosa was gravely wounded. At the decisive moment, a bolt of lightning struck and scattered the enemies, followed by a deadly blow from Fenris that sent the monsters flying. After helping, Ryuta introduced Fenris as his companion, but she expressed displeasure at not being recognized as his wife. When a bear attacked again, her gaze alone was enough to make it retreat. Fenris then proposed taming the creature, coloring it, and naming it Sibi. Ryuta used his transformation ability to transform the animal into a rabbit, making it easier to transport. Impressed by their power, Balirosa begged Ryuta to guide her group in combat. The group consisted of Balirosa, Bevel, Banos, and Baser. They recounted that, after the army's defeat, the capital's hero had refused to fight without a strong enough escort. The king then forced the soldiers to train intensely, only to face monsters like the ones they had seen. Fenris sensed danger in the four warriors' proximity to her supposed husband and demanded that Ryuta confirm their relationship. Despite initially refusing the training, Ryuta eventually accepted, convinced by Fenris's gentle way of persuading him. The problem was that he had never taught anyone, as everything he knew came from the system. Even so, when he gave his consent, the warriors were willing to learn. The group also asked to stay in the house where they were staying, and even though he didn't know who the real owner was, Fenris agreed. Meanwhile, in the Demon Lord's territory, news of Fenris's defeat and the forest being purified by an unknown person spread quickly. The Demon Lord became furious and ordered Ryuta's capture at any cost. Fenris's new life seemed peaceful, but in reality it was marked by unexpected events. As soon as the sun rose, before he even opened his eyes, Ryuta was startled to feel someone lying next to him. Fenris casually rested her head on his arm, seemingly content as if it were a natural occurrence. Ryuta didn't hesitate to remind her that they were only pretending to be husband and wife, and therefore sharing a room was part of the disguise. To her, it was just another step in her deception plan. Ryuta, however, was extremely embarrassed, unable to handle such intimacy. To avoid embarrassment, he tried to leave for the hallway, but Fenris quickly blocked his way, pointing out that if anyone saw him leave alone, his disguise would be questioned. He returned to bed with a flushed face, and before he could even gather his thoughts, he was surprised when Fenris brought him new clothes and offered to help him change right there. Fortunately, Balirosa burst in to discuss the training, and no one brought up what had just happened. The training began with a confrontation with a giant boar. Despite the powerful attacks, Balirosa was overpowered. Bala rushed to her aid and was injured. Fenris took up the defense while Ryuta led Banos in the counterattack, but the arrows couldn't penetrate the animal's thick hide. Balirosa cast a few spells and ran out of energy. The formation descended into chaos and they lost control. With no alternative, Ryuta rented a large house with the money he'd earned from the previous mission. He completely renovated it, creating a stable place to live. Fenris was responsible for preparing dinner, but he brought completely raw dishes to the table, making everyone uncomfortable. She then had to work alongside Balirosa to grill each portion. The meal ended up being a joyful affair, with a variety of dishes and much praise for the knight's culinary skills. Fenris was uncomfortable, but upon discovering that the salad had been prepared by Ryuta, her expression changed, and she ate in silence, demonstrating satisfaction. That night, they went to the guild to finish the quest. While they waited, Fenris asked to leave. Alone, Ryuta received an invitation from the royal family, asking him to support the capital hero's army in the campaign against the Demon Lord. His reputation for previous battles had already attracted the attention of the court. Ryuta, however, unwilling to get involved in political conflicts, declined. On the way back, he found Fenris returning in a disheveled state. She had just attended a cooking class, trying to improve her skills, but due to her power beyond her limits, she broke several utensils and even unwittingly used magic to speed up the cooking, turning everything into an inedible mess. Meanwhile, news that an adventurer had dared to refuse the royal family's invitation reached the capital hero, who reacted with displeasure and arrogance, even publicly challenging him to appear before him and bow. Ryuta, however, simply ignored it. Back in their new home, Fenris's 4 apprentices continued their training. However, while the physical tasks were far from complete, Babel devoted herself to the fields, plowing the land to plant vegetables as if she had decided to settle there. She showed no interest in sword training and never let go of her hoe and shovel, which made Ryuta sigh, imagining that the simple life she longed for had become stranger than she could have imagined. In shooting practice, Banos still only ventured against wooden targets, unable to aim at living beings. Babel was often exhausted, and Ryuta eventually gave her a ring that helped restore magical power. Unexpectedly, Babel placed the ring on her ring finger, which made Fenris jealous. Meanwhile, Balirosa remained unable to deal with the monsters and had to repeatedly call for help. Fenris saved her once more and firmly reminded her not to call her husband in insinuating terms. Meanwhile, Ulimina, a cat-eared demon who had previously been granted an audience by the Demon Lord, watched from a distance. At dinner, Fenris personally cooked for the entire group and even prepared a special portion for Ryuta. She admitted that she had been learning to cook with each trip to the city and that she was beginning to find true joy in cooking. Seeing her so dedicated, Ulimina found it hard to believe that this this young woman had been one of the Demon Lord's 4 generals. Driven by curiosity, she entered the house under the pretense of patrol. Fenris promptly informed the visitor that she and Ryuta were newlyweds and lived there. During tea, Ulamina kept a watchful eye on the two. Realizing that Ryuta didn't react to demonic energy and that his strength was impossible to measure, she became even more suspicious. To gather more information, Ulamina broached the subject of Delbia Forest, which had been strangely silent. Ryuta calmly replied that he had purified the place, information that shocked the visitor, as the forest had served as Fenris's brother's base, meaning he likely hadn't survived. Fenris confirmed that she had expected this outcome, and that, as a warrior, she accepted the loss. For to her, love and loyalty were more valuable than blood ties. The 4 members of the training group who had been listening hidden outside, then clearly understood that Fenris was the wolf who had nearly defeated them in the past. Ulamina began calculating possibilities and planned to use the opportunity of a practice duel to eliminate them both. Fenris, however, intercepted the plan in time and didn't hesitate to provoke her opponent for getting too close to her husband. The duel ensued. Ulamina adopted a top-down attack strategy, but Ryuta only needed to snap his fingers to neutralize all her magic. The subsequent containment attack left her with no chance, forcing her to surrender. The next morning, the group sat down to discuss Fenris's true identity. Although hiding it was against the law, no one dared to denounce her, as they had all been saved by that couple. At that moment, dragons appeared outside, led by Ulamina herself, who had returned with a vengeance. Ryuta showed no fear in the face of such high-level creatures. After observing for a moment, he called down celestial lightning that wiped out most of the dragon pack. The survivors retreated hastily, abandoning even their leader. Balarosa then lightly suggested throwing a hoe as a weapon, and Ryuta, in response, reinforced the tool with a sequence of enhancement spells, transforming it into a massive projectile that felled another dragon. From then on, the group began jokingly calling Balarosa a dragon-slaying heroine. The others lamented that there were no more dragons available for them to also earn a title. Meanwhile, the Demon Lord watched from afar. Witnessing such extraordinary power, he decided to take personal action. After the surveillance incident, Ryuta erected a barrier around the house to warn of any demons approaching. Within the home, Fenris, besides being his wife, assumed the role of a famous guardian, simultaneously loving and ruthless, large and alert to any threat. Still, she scolded Ryuta for being condescending and not having dealt with Ulamina the day before. The real reason, however, was the guilt he felt over having purified the forest, a place where living beings had once existed, which made him reluctant to take extreme measures. Fenris understood this sadness and strove to comfort him with everything she could offer. Meanwhile, the 4 apprentices continued to discuss Balarosa's Dragon Slayer title, though they acknowledged that most of the credit went to Ryuta. Seeing them fascinated by the hoe that had brought down a dragon, Balarosa silently returned to her training, still feeling the weight of the near-certain opportunity to earn a valuable title that could pave her way back to nobility. Just then, a stranger appeared, asking for directions to an acquaintance. Since no one lived there besides Ryuta and his wife, Balarosa was immediately alert. The man claimed to be an old friend of Fenris, and assured them he meant no harm, though his true purpose was to scout the terrain. Before leaving, he introduced himself as Goza, and asked them to deliver a message. Shortly after he left, the warning barrier sounded, revealing the visitor to be the Demon Lord himself, whose real name was Gazaru. The next morning, Gazaru returned and knocked on the door like a guest. Upon entering, he brought Balarosa with him, leaving her nearly petrified. The Demon Lord got straight to the point and invited Ryuta to join his side. The proposal was rejected, as Ryuta maintained a neutral stance and did not wish to be drawn into the conflict between the two races. Gazaru then revealed profound aspects of the history between humans and demons, dating back to the time of the first Demon Lord, who had originally been a human forced to become king, and who had started the war over slavery disputes. In the present, he claimed to have no ambition to rule, wanting only to prevent humans from accumulating more power to oppress the demons. The tart hadn't even cooled when the proposal was rejected. Gazaru left, but kept Ryuta and Balarosa in mind, and though she didn't show it on her face, inside she remained trembling. The next day, she came downstairs, and was surprised to see the Demon Lord having breakfast with the couple. Startled, she pretended she needed rest, and hurriedly left. Gazaru showed some admiration for her temperament, and intercepted her for a private conversation. With each new attempt, Balarosa found a way to escape. Over time, news that the Demon Lord was frequently haunting Ryuta's house reached the royal family. The king was enraged, believing that Ryuta had not only refused court, but was also favoring the demons. While the ministers prepared to mobilize troops, the princess firmly opposed it, arguing that a rash act would push Ryuta definitively to the enemy's side. Despite her objections, the king ordered preparations for an attack. The hero of the capital volunteered immediately, demanding the right to personally subdue the man living in the forest who was beginning to instill fear in everyone. While Fenris and those closest to him led a peaceful life in the countryside, on the other side of the world, the internal affairs of the demonic faction were undergoing profound changes. In the heart of the Dark Territory, the demon lord Gazaru, leader of all creatures, suddenly announced that he would leave the castle to visit an old friend he held dear. This person was none other than Ryuta, who had made the Delbia forest glow with an unprecedented purification spell. Ulimina, one of his closest advisors, tried her best to dissuade him, both out of concern for the safety of the king she revered, and out of fear of delays in the army awaiting orders to march against the humans. For the last week, thousands of soldiers had remained on standby, but Gazaru remained calm, sipping coffee and contemplating the visit to the man many considered a criminal for annihilating an entire forest with an invisible power. Far from the conflict, Ryuta pondered the idea of bringing some magical products he had created to market, hoping to earn extra money to support the simple life of himself and his companions. Finn, the young woman with wolf form, expressed concern. She feared that, out of consideration for her feelings, Ryuta had declined the royal family's invitation to join the campaign to eliminate the demon lord. In Finn's view, if he had sought glory instead of hiding, he might already have a resounding reputation, abundant wealth, and comfort instead of dealing with menial jobs as he did now. Ryuta, however, stood firm. What he desired was not status, power, or public acclaim. He simply wanted to live peacefully in this other world, without engaging in further power struggles or wars. This intention was still being considered when a quick knock on the door broke the silence. As he stepped outside, he was surprised to find an entire army in shining armor. Leading the way was the hero of the capital, once hailed as a savior, now ready to accuse Ryuta of collusion with the demon lord, and willing to create every excuse to make him a traitor in the eyes of all. Convinced he represented justice, the hero presented two options he considered definitive. Either Ryuta would submit to become his subordinate and join the campaign against the demons, or he would be declared a traitor and face the consequences right then and there. Finishing his own self-important proclamation, the hero of the capital stared intently and waited for an answer. Ryuta refused bluntly, not wanting to be drawn into any conflict. His opponent's expression immediately changed to a threat, forcing the entire group to try to persuade him, since failing to do so would result in them being seen as rebels. Understanding the risk, Ryuta decided to leave that place, not out of fear, but to avoid causing trouble for those around him. Fenris didn't hesitate and stated he would follow him anywhere. Even more surprisingly, the four warriors who had been training with Ryuta also decided to leave together, having understood something more important than titles: trust and kindness. With this support, Ryuta cast a massive teleportation spell and took everyone, along with their luggage, their house, and even the objects scattered around the yard. Everything vanished in the blink of an eye, leaving the self-proclaimed hero plunged into confusion. At that moment, the demon lord Gazaru appeared and found only a cold void. Overcome with anger, he blamed his subordinates entirely, and declared that he would lead his army directly to the capital of Kriros. While everywhere prepared for a fierce war, in a distant corner of the west, 6 people managed to escape the maelstrom of conflict. Their new home, though simple, overflowed with human warmth. For Ryuta, Fenris, and their companions, the tranquility of that refuge was more valuable than any power, because it represented exactly the life they desired. After the demon lord launched a full-scale attack, the kingdom of Kriros retreated to a defensive position. The king panicked and ordered all mages to cast a great purification spell, seen as a last resort despite the high cost. After a chant similar to a prayer ceremony, a holy light covered the sky and managed to repel the demonic army for a time. However, this response left all the mages exhausted, and the king himself fell ill, rendering the court unable to withstand the next advance. While the royal palace was in chaos, Ryuta and Fenris maintained a peaceful routine in the distant countryside. Fen began researching the local market and planned to sell defense equipment. Rasa tried his hand at the vegetable business, while Biller returned to training horses. The remaining 2 had not yet set their course, and for now, helped with household chores. Ryuta remained generous and willing to offer shelter and steady work, as long as everyone lived honestly. Meanwhile, in the capital, the princess took over from the king. She immediately stripped the hero of the capital of his title due to his neglect of the campaign. From a symbol of hope, he became a shadow of decay, stumbling along with only his servant who followed loyally at his side. In contrast to the tension of the outside world, world, Ryuta and Fenris led a simple life in their small house. Though they called themselves husband and wife, the two maintained a respectful distance. One night, in the silence of their home, Ryuta thought of the young white-furred wolf as thanking her for staying by his side from the beginning and helping him find peace in a strange world. Before he could finish his reflection, Fenris was already asleep, his lips curled in a half-smile as if living a sweet dream. The next morning, the sky dawned unusually clear. Her friends suggested that Ryuta and Fenris go out to relax and leave the housework to them. The wolf was visibly happy and pulled her husband along for a stroll through town, eating and buying a few items. When Ryuta asked what she wanted, Fenris simply smiled and calmly examined each stall. After some time choosing, the two stopped at a gem stall. A gleaming stone caught their attention. Without hesitation, Ryuta bought the jewel for his wife, as a thank you for always being by his side. That night, Fenris admired the adornment tirelessly, his eyes shining with a joy indescribable. The four remaining girls, although encouraging the couple to have fun, ended up spreading out, each in their own corner, without disturbing them. At some point, Fenris fell asleep and rolled onto Ryuta's bed, and though the two felt a bit shy at first, the distance between them gradually diminished as they lived peacefully together. Elsewhere, the capital's hero, now a fugitive, secretly infiltrated the kingdom's treasury. Even without his former status, he retained remarkable combat skills. The maidservant accompanying him continued to call him by his former title, believing he would regain his glory. Flattered, he threw himself with greater fervor into the search for powerful artifacts that could turn the tide. Finally, a strange voice whispered, tempting him to release a sealed entity in exchange for power. This voice led the fugitive to the deepest chamber, where an evil sword lay hidden. The maidservant felt uneasy, for no one but him seemed to hear its presence. Even so, those who harbored dreams of revenge needed no justification. The moment he touched the sword, a dark force emerged and awakened an ancient demon, who granted him 3 wishes. The exact content of these wishes would be revealed later. With the king absent, authority temporarily fell to Princess Iris. Faced with this chaotic situation, she decided to summon an ancient prophet. For a kingdom of advanced magic, relying on divination revealed the depth of their impasse. Soon after, a strange type of magic ring attached itself to the necks of all the castle's residents. Iris immediately understood the cause and ordered an inspection of the treasury. The prophet confirmed that the previously sealed demon had been released. These rings were signs that the bearers would be substitutes whenever the demon granted a wish. Only then did Iris reveal an ancient secret. The ancestors had made a pact with the demon to destroy the demon lord in exchange for the sacrifice of half the continent's population. The price was too high, so later generations chose to seal the entity away. Now the man who had once been the capital's hero and had become an exile would break the seal, bringing back the calamity. The kingdom had only time to survive until the 3rd wish was granted. The prophet set to work immediately, and without needing letters, firmly stated that to save the world, they needed to find the true hero. That person was Ryuta, who lived in seclusion in western Kryros. Despite this, Iris did not authorize military mobilization, understanding that dividing forces at that moment would be unwise. She herself would set out to seek their last hope. Meanwhile, Ryuta had just begun trading, specializing in dragon-scale equipment. During sales, he studied the market and built a network of relationships. Outside, 2 former students watched silently, awed by Ryuta's versatility as a merchant. Balarosa could only believe he was the ideal many desired. One might imagine Balarosa would be jealous upon seeing Fenris close to Ryuta, but in truth, she was merely overjoyed, for finding someone so kind was rare. Fenris denied the assumption and joked that the demon lord Gazaru seemed very interested in Balarosa, though she always managed to avoid him. At that moment, Ryuta returned, and the entire group headed back home. On the way, Fenris gently reminded her that, although her husband worked hard, sometimes she felt sad about staying home. Before she could finish her thought, the warning system sent an emergency signal as a demon had approached. When the two turned, they found Haida, the creature summoned by the fallen hero's first wish. With the sole purpose of eliminating Ryuta, the enemy attacked immediately. Fenris didn't hesitate and stepped forward to take the blow in her husband's place, leaving Ryuta stunned. The defense system activated immediately, creating a protective shield around the 3, but the situation remained dangerous. Ryuta tried using recovery magic, but Fenris's injuries were beyond the system's capabilities. Several healing abilities failed one after the other. Meanwhile, Haida continued with a high-level magic chant and generated a destructive beam that swept through the area, transforming the city into a sea of fire. Still, Ryuta remained steadfast thanks to the automatic layer of protection, and shortly afterward, the system announced that he had copied his opponent's spell. Both braced themselves for a clash of equal strength between a supreme demon and someone with attributes beyond all limits. What would come would be a true clash of divine powers, with no room for complacency. Under the somber sunset that covered the battlefield, Ryuta did not immediately rush into a life-or-death struggle against Haida, the one responsible for pushing his hatred to its extreme. Instead, he He fell silent for a moment and let his mind drift back to the past, recalling in sequence the memories linked to Fenris, the wolf girl who had once been part of the Demon Lord's army but had abandoned everything for him. In that strange world, the two supported each other through lonely days. Fenris was the first to reach out and pull him out of the deep pit of isolation, and consciously or not, Ryuta also led her to changes from which there was no turning back. Filled with boiling rage, Ryuta activated a time reversal spell and healed all of Fenris's injuries. She awoke with her body intact, her eyes blazing as she stared at the man who had not hesitated to go to extreme lengths to protect her. Ahead, Ryuta suffocated Heda, the demon who had once served as someone else's tool, with pure power that required no ritual or verbal incantation. Each blow combined will and emotion, powerful enough to shatter every barrier of darkness the opponent prided himself on. When Heda staggered, Fenris rushed forward and embraced Ryuta from behind. This gesture was not only a plea for him to stop, but also a support that prevented him from crossing the line where he could lose himself. Ryuta, still pulsing with anger, remained motionless before the true feelings of his companion beside him. He retreated, leaving Heda lying panting on the ground. His eyes were filled with fear mixed with regret. At the same time, Princess Lytia's group reached the desolate western region. Although not yet fully recovered from the great purification spell, the group pressed on, fearing that disaster was imminent. Not long after, the protective rings around everyone's necks lost their effect simultaneously. The binding magic that had previously been connected to desire suddenly vanished. The reason wasn't hard to imagine, for Huff no longer had the strength to keep the pact. Elsewhere, the evil soul took over the body of the maid who had accompanied the hero of the capital, transforming her into Marina, a dark witch filled with hatred. Wasting no time, she immediately sealed away her former master, turning him into a giant, mindless creature, merely a tool of revenge against the royal family. Upon discovering traces of the princess's group, Marina changed direction and advanced like a black tornado, aiming to exterminate the entire royal line. Meanwhile, Ryuta cared for Haba in the small house. After her defeat, she no longer displayed arrogance, becoming cautious and obedient, like someone awakened from a long dream. Through memory-reading magic, Ryuta clearly saw everything Haba had suffered, forced to grant wishes under the selfish orders of the hero of the capital and used only as a tool to serve power. Faced with this, Emily surprisingly suggested that Haba be kept with them. The reason was simple: releasing her would be dangerous, imprisoning her would be wasteful, so keeping her nearby for monitoring would be more reasonable. Although Ryuta remained concerned, even mentioning his near-death experience, he finally agreed. When Emily made a decision, she could only believe that hearts could change, provided they were guided correctly. Thus Haba, the demon who had once wreaked havoc, became the full-time housekeeper of the house in the west, where Ryuta and Emily chose to live a quiet life, removed from the whirlwind of power and war. Haba was surprised to discover that Ryuta, the man who had just faced her, possessed attributes far beyond normal standards, something that was no longer human, but almost divine. Awed by this power, she resolved to be completely loyal to him. However, suspicion arose in Haba's heart when she recalled the complex look her new master had given her. This fear made her wonder if by chance, she was serving someone who enjoyed being hurt. After the battle, Ryuta considered restoring the devastated city using the time reversal spell. However, Haba immediately objected. She pointed out that controlling time always brought unpredictable risks, especially on such a large scale. This spell could save individuals, but reverting an entire region could create ripple effects. After hearing this, Ryuta curiously asked why he had the ability to use this kind of magic. Haba pointed to the infinity symbol on his status plate and explained that this attribute allowed Ryuta to copy any skill he came into contact with, learn unlimited spells, and even comprehend powers beyond time. That afternoon, Ryuta's household officially gained a new member, Haba. The three girls who had been his students became even more worried. Previously, a demon lord had already been dining with them, and now a demon had returned to serve as their housekeeper. That night, Ryuta couldn't help but think about what Haba had said. He suddenly realized that with his current abilities, returning to the old world was entirely within his reach. Fen, sensing her husband's state of mind, asked directly if he would ever leave. She wouldn't stop him, only asking softly that if he returned to his homeland he would take her with him. Hearing this, Ryuta was overcome with emotion, hugged his wife, and declared that he had no intention of leaving. In the old world he had been discriminated against and rejected, but now this place was his true home. Soon after, Ryuta made a formal proposal, hoping that Fen would become his lifelong partner. Fen laughed and said she had long considered them husband and wife. Even though it was late, the proposal still made her heart flutter with happiness. That night, as the two were immersed in their intimate moment, a cold breeze blew through the room. Haba, the nearby servant, appeared in the corner of the room and calmly announced that she had observed the entire scene. She believed her mission was to always remain by the side of Ryuta, the supreme being. Fen sighed, and Ryuta simply shook his head. Even possessing limitless power, he still couldn't overcome the tactlessness of the household's residents. From then on, Haba was ordered never again to appear uninvited during private moments, because the Supreme Being didn't always need witnesses. Although rumors of Ryuta and his conquests had already spread throughout many lands, the place where Princess Lytia and her entourage were traveling was remote and isolated, to the point that no one knew her name. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, Ryuta's simple life flowed peacefully. The hot meals, increasingly refined thanks to Fenris's culinary skills, were now effectively supported by two demons who had once been enemies but had become devoted servants. With their mysterious powers, they performed household chores with a snap of their fingers, keeping the house clean and organized. In contrast to this efficiency, the four girls who had been Ryuta's students were nothing more than mere dependents. Among them, Bellerosa was somewhat less useless. She was the only one with real farming experience, and also had the help of her pet bear, which made the field work progress considerably. Although she wasn't good in combat, when it came to plowing and tending the crops, no one was her equal. Bellerosa had knowledge of horse care and wagon rentals, at least contributing a small contribution to the family's finances. Perhaps it was precisely because they sensed the anxiety in their owner's heart that their horses always tried to comfort her, as if to tell her everything would be okay. The last member was Bono, a young woman slow-witted since childhood, who had dreamed of becoming a royal magician, following in the footsteps of her father and brother. She had experienced an incident that had made this ideal distant, but Fenris continued to help her practice magic, gradually restoring Bono's determination to follow her chosen path. Suddenly, a scream echoed in the yard. The group ran and encountered a pitch-black creature, a shadowy unicorn dancing strangely in the vegetable garden and nearly trampling the girls. Fortunately, Bono reacted in time and used magic to restrain it. Only then did Bellerosa confess that she had brought the unicorn home, thinking it was docile. Unexpectedly, it went berserk, and now she feared it would hurt someone, so she was already planning to eliminate it. Luckily, Biller, a horse expert, quickly devised a plan. She transformed the bear into a one-horned rabbit, and used ropes to coordinate and tame the animal like a true Western cowgirl. After the incident, Biller had the idea of using the vast surrounding land to open a ranch or a horse training school. The land belonged to a wealthy lord, and if they could buy it as Fenris had bought their current house, all their plans would become possible. It was clear that a long-term strategy was beginning to take shape in Biller's mind. Meanwhile, Ryuta and Fenris were making a rare trip to the district. He was seeking business opportunities, while his wife saw the outing as a private encounter, a rare sight among the multitude of people living with them at home. Ryuta was discussing with the owner of an armor shop the design of a lightweight garment suitable for women, while Fenris simply watched her husband's work in silence, with visible pride. Suddenly, the sky changed color. Dark clouds spread, covering not only the place where the couple stood, but also Princess Lytia's position. From above, two strange figures appeared, one a giant monster, the other a dark magic witch named Demlina. Without much ado, their target was the princess. Instead of escorting the princess away, four bodyguards decided to stay and fight. However, Demlina only needed to flick her hand to send everyone flying. At that moment, the two demons in the house also sensed the danger and rushed to help. Ryuta quickly realized that the monster was actually a transformed person, and that the witch Demlina was someone who had once ruled the entire kingdom with dark magic, only to be defeated and sealed beneath the holy sword. This resurrection had likely occurred because someone had accidentally broken the seal. In a rush, Haba requested permission to face Demlina directly, while Ryuta and Fenris would focus on rescuing the civilians and preventing a repeat of the tragedy. While Princess Lydia fought Marina, Haba unexpectedly intervened. Although Demlina attempted to summon a thunder spell, the demon merely snapped her fingers and neutralized it, declaring that all magical attacks were now useless against her. When the magic no longer had any effect, the witch resorted to hand-to-hand combat, combined with stealth attacks with invisibility spells, but still to no avail. Finally, Marina opened a dark gate and empowered Reiner, the deformed hero, making him gigantic, like something out of a movie. However, the instant the monster rose imposingly, all the sustaining magic was broken. Reiner's body shrank back to its original form. It was clear that Ryuta had interfered, concerned about the harm that could befall civilians. Upon seeing this, Haba immediately lowered her head, asking for forgiveness and simply wishing to complete the remaining mission. She raised her hand to the sky, condensed Marina's soul into a crystal, and swallowed it whole. Only the unconscious maid and Reiner lay sprawled in the middle of the street remained. At that moment, Lytia finally came face to face with Ryuta. She apologized on behalf of the court for all the trouble caused by her father and the false hero. At the same time, the princess made it clear that they needed a new symbol to rekindle the people's faith, hoping Ryuta would accept his title back. He immediately refused. Ryuta had no intention of returning to the warpath. He simply wanted to live in peace with his wife and friends. Back home, the three girls waited to present their plan for expanding the lands. Biller needed more space to train animals. Blot wanted to grow vegetables vegetables to sell at market, and Rosa intended to pursue practical farming. While Ryuta was willing to spend money on the purchase, they wanted to negotiate independently to prove their capabilities. He had to compromise by putting the property in his name, but splitting the profits so that each would keep their share. Once the deal was finalized, the land was handed over, which excited everyone except Blot, who disliked the use of magic in agriculture, believing that only manual cultivation could be considered genuine work. Bono, the girl who had remained silent until then, gathered courage and said she would like to learn more about land reclamation magic, as she was about to become a teacher at a magic academy in another city. Faced with such a reasonable analysis, Blot ceded part of the land to Bono for experiments. By evening, the atmosphere in the house was lively with plans for the future. Even with everyone busy, Rosa seemed thoughtful. Around the same time, Ryuta revealed his desire to open his own shop. He shared the idea with Fenris and, as he spoke, surprised her by handing her a wedding ring. Although they had long been husband and wife, only now did they have the opportunity to exchange rings, which overwhelmed Fenris with joy. While the two enjoyed their simple life, Reiner, no longer a hero, was imprisoned alongside the maid who had previously been possessed. This outcome demonstrated that, in this world, even someone who had reached the pinnacle could be pushed to the abyss by a single wrong decision. Balarosa, meanwhile, was overcome by a strange dream. She wore a dazzling, magnificent gown, appearing amidst a grand, ornate hall, surrounded by the festive sounds of monsters. A figure of noble bearing emerged from the shadows. The demon lord Go approached, and offered blessings for the upcoming marriage. The entire hall vibrated in celebration, calling her queen, while Goa boldly declared that he would conquer the entire world to offer her to his beloved. All those thunderous sounds disappeared, as Balarosa awoke with a start in the silent night, sweat dripping down her forehead. A strange feeling of anxiety kept her awake, leading to a prolonged state of fatigue that soon caught the attention of the other residents. Fenris noticed Balarosa's haggard face and questioned her. After hesitating, she admitted that she had been having nightmares lately, almost always related to the demon lord Go. Fenris, a member of the Wolf of the Fang tribe, explained that in his people's legends, dreams often reflected hidden desires in the subconscious. Hearing this, the group turned their gaze to the girl who had declared her hatred for the demon lord with all her might. No further words were needed for everyone to understand that Balarosa's heart had been touched. Although she tried to deny it, her emotions could no longer be hidden. Meanwhile, in Fenris's control center, the entire region's defense system issued an alert signal upon detecting the entry of a powerful magical source into the protected area. However, since there was no evidence of destructive behavior, Ryuta decided to simply monitor. In the capital, Princess Effa was informed that Fenris had sent rare coins as a donation, a type now almost non-existent in the kingdom. After investigating, she discovered that Fenris had been Banaza, a man summoned from another world and later exiled by her father, the king. Forced to live in isolation for a long time, recognizing the injustice of the past, the princess could not contain her remorse for having turned her back on someone who had shown goodwill towards the kingdom. Meanwhile, the hero of the capital, having escaped with his maid, remained hidden in a remote region. Rummaging through a magic bag taken by chance from the prison, he found a mysterious item, a shovel capable of digging holes so quickly that it created underground caverns in an instant. However, without thinking, the two fell into the open hole and were left stranded, having to temporarily accustom themselves to the smell of earth while they awaited another chance. In the castle across the battle line, the demon lord Go continued to send people to search for Fenris everywhere, despite the objections of some subordinates, including Ulamina. She believed that instead of wasting time searching for someone who had disappeared, the demon race should seize the moment to strike back, especially since the human army was weakened after the large-scale purification ritual. Go, however, remained firm in his belief that Fenris was a threat that could not be ignored. The power to erase an entire forest with a single spell made him see him as a living bomb. Tensions among the demons mounted, especially as another general, Uegot, began to doubt the demon lord's clarity and began to plot a coup. Meanwhile, in the distant countryside where Fenris's warm home and his loved ones resided, peaceful life continued to flow. One day, the couple were strolling through town when they chanced upon a woman who had previously run a convenience store and was now closing its doors due to lack of supplies. Although the war had not yet reached that place, its silent effects were already being felt. That afternoon, Belirosa invited everyone to a meal. She explained that she had just been promoted to adventurer and wanted to express her gratitude. But before they could begin eating, the two demon servants rushed in to warn them that a powerful energy source was approaching. The entire group was on high alert, but Fenris and Haba quickly recognized the visitor as the demon demon lord Go himself. Although they breathed a sigh of relief upon realizing he had no hostile intentions, Bellyrosa froze, and the expression on her face revealed everything. The meal had barely begun when the mysterious figure who had introduced himself revealed his identity. He was an intelligence officer for the demon lord Gawain, who was searching for Fenris. However, the person he truly wanted to meet was Bellyrosa. This surprised everyone as she had single-handedly held off an entire demonic army. The mood of the dinner quickly shifted to a serious conversation. Gawain revealed that in the past he had often disguised himself to explore human cuisine, and upon hearing of Bellyrosa's talent in the kitchen, he became even more curious. Despite his somber appearance, he exuded calm and composure. He believed that cultural development was as important as military strength. When Bellyrosa asked him directly if this was espionage, he admitted it, and clearly stated his intention to invite Ryuta to join his side. Bellyrosa's concern turned to anger, because once again someone was interfering with the peaceful life they were trying to build. Gawain, however, maintained a calm demeanor and suggested that humans always associated demons with calamity, using this as a justification for oppression. Fenris had lived with Ryuta for a long time without seeing any problem. Haba then intervened and explained clearly that the fundamental difference between humans and demons lay in the amount of demonic essence within each. When there was excessive concentration, humans saw it as contamination that needed to be purified. On the other hand, the demonic faction often harbored belligerent thoughts, always ready for conflict. The clash between the races remained deep, and so the demon lord could not remain inert forever. Even though he realized that his presence had tensed the atmosphere, Gawain asked permission to leave. On the way home, Rosa remained pensive and said little, only noticing that the fear she had felt for Gawain had vanished. Ryuta also became thoughtful. He had imagined that this world would be more peaceful than his former home, but he discovered that the conflicts there were even more intense. Looking at his wife sitting beside him, he instinctively pulled her closer, and the affectionate scene was repeated once more. Elsewhere, the couple who had escaped from prison were attempting to climb a cliff. The maid climbed first, but the luggage in her hands was too heavy and made her stagger. Rainer tried to help, but his hands slipped, and they both slid back down. A new day began in Ryuta's warm home with his wife. Breakfast brought burgers that in practice contained only the ham, as the bread was missing. Even so, the aroma and intense flavor pleased everyone. Fenris's cooking skills had improved greatly and earned endless praise. Everyone recognized the merit of the cooking teacher who had previously mentored her. Fenris took the opportunity to say that she had returned to thank and show her gratitude. Although everyone had the impression that she was looking for an excuse to show off her wedding ring, the master, who sensed the intention behind the visit, nevertheless enthusiastically guided her through a few more dishes suitable for family meals and even suggested a children's menu. The moment children were mentioned, the entire table fell silent for a moment, and the air thickened with thoughts of family plans. Just as the mood began to loosen, there was a knock at the door. Upon opening, everyone was surprised to see that the visitor was Princess Cello, who had caused much trouble in the past. She appeared with a large retinue of guards and a solemn expression indescribable. Ryuta bristled at the sight, as he no longer wanted anything to do with the title of hero. This time, however, the princess hadn't come to stir up trouble, but to apologize for past misdeeds. The conversation continued over tea. The princess expressed a desire to speak privately with Ryuta. Everyone politely withdrew, except Fenris, who wouldn't move even half a step away from his husband. Ryuta, sensing his wife's firmness, stated that if there was something that needed to be hidden from her, he didn't need to hear it either. At the end of these words, Fenris's face lit up, and Princess Kello accepted. She opened a map showing the locations of the great mages who secretly guarded crucial points in the country. This was a crown secret, but she would share it with Ryuta because the trust placed in her was great. Kello admitted that the internal situation in the capital was unstable. The protective magical barrier was weakening, while the main mages had not yet recovered. The suburban areas far from the center would soon be defenseless. She expected Ryuta to help protect these places, not as a warrior, but as someone who maintained order and defense. This request provoked a strong reaction from Fenris, who understood that her husband had already withdrawn from the war and could not be repeatedly drawn into external problems. The princess explained that the king remained in a coma, and that upon awakening, the peace would be shattered. If the king discovered that Ryuta had been in contact with the demon lord Go, he would use it as a pretext to accuse him of treason. Taking advantage of the period when power was temporarily in her hands, Cello intended to turn the tide. The plan was to expose the king's mistakes, force him to abdicate, and only then officially accept the throne. What Cello really really needed wasn't Ryuta's presence on the front lines. The request was that he maintain neutrality, not ally with forces against the kingdom, and that, in the provinces, his presence would help stabilize the situation and prevent the spread of the war. Ryuta seemed to understand the real intention. He agreed, on the condition that Fenris no longer oppose him. Although reluctant at first, his wife realized that her husband did not wish to participate in the war and only intended to avoid human losses, so she agreed. In another region, deep in the woods, two wanted men were still on the run. Sulla, the faithful servant who remained at the side of the former hero Reiner, was hungry, tired, and aware that she was only creating more trouble. Still, when she received some cookies from him, her face lit up. Once again, his silent care moved her to the point of confessing her feelings. Ever since she was rescued from prison, she had been unable to escape his shadow. As they spoke, a magical force emerged. A thin thread like mist fell from the sky and bound them both in an instant. He was a loyal subordinate of Ugard, carrying out the plan to overthrow the demon lord Go-O. Back at Ryuta's house, the night brought a sense of tranquility. At the bedside, Fenris approached his husband and spoke gently. Ryuta still seemed uneasy about the morning's proposals. He didn't want to be drawn into the maelstrom of war, but he also couldn't ignore the suffering of the innocent. He had already said he dreamed of a world where humans and demons could live in harmony, so that if he ever had a child with his wife, that child wouldn't have to grow up in fear. Hearing this, Fenris said little, only tightened his grip on her husband's hand. In the dim light, her answer was simple. Wherever he went, she would follow. Some villages began to evacuate due to demon attacks. A little girl gathering seeds would have been in danger if Fenris and Ryuta hadn't appeared in time. They erected a barrier to block the monsters without retaliating, prompting Fenris to grumble that her husband was too kind. Ryuta maintained a neutral stance and didn't accept rewards, so as not to appear to be siding with the humans. In fact, ever since hearing the princess's story, he had been moved. Fenris in turn was unjustifiably suspicious, thinking her husband wanted to marry the princess. The demons were enraged because Fenris was helping commoners. Ryuta advised retreat. They ignored him and allowed a one-eyed giant to advance. The giant despised the wolf-like race and even mocked Fungazine's death. Fenris became enraged and decided to teach him a lesson. Ryuta simply asked her not to kill him. Fenris moved nimbly, switching positions with her opponent and making him fall under her own blow. Then she cast a spell that bound the giant's limbs, ending the fight cleanly. As her companions prepared to attack, Ryuta used magic to immobilize them and gently warned them before releasing them. Fenris praised her husband for knowing how to intimidate without using his hands, though she still preferred to resolve matters with fists rather than words. The villagers later appeared to thank her. At first they were wary of Fenris, but Ryuta reassured them, saying she was no different from a house pet. A little girl ran to thank her personally. When Ryuta mentioned he was acting on the princess's orders, the villagers grew even more trusting. After these events, rumors spread widely about a masked hero and a giant wolf who roamed the provinces to drive away demons. They often left messages claiming they had been sent by the princess, which boosted her reputation. Upon hearing the news, Princess Salo was moved to tears, because Ryuta had finally agreed to help. As the couple traveled from village to village to rescue people, someone watched them from above. It was the demon lord Go. The recent attacks, however, were not coming from him, but from Uigard. While Go was away from the palace, Uigard staged a coup and seized the throne. He also planned to use the two prisoners captured earlier to perform a ritual of an evil god to eliminate Go. Upon hearing this, the true demon lord hurried back and prepared for the decisive battle that would restore his power. Rewinding time a few days. On a breezy afternoon, the demon lord Go and Ulamina suddenly appeared at Ryuta and Fenris's doorstep, looking exhausted but determined. The goal was to seek temporary refuge for a short period. At first Fenris thought Go was joking, but seeing the seriousness in his eyes, he had no choice but to inquire thoroughly about the situation. Go began recounting recent events in the demon world. Ever since Uigard, a high-ranking general, declared a coup and seized the throne, the entire previous power system and the three elite generals were pushed into a passive position. Ulamina angrily questioned why her three peers hadn't immediately arrested the traitor, but they all remained silent, saying they would witness the decisive battle for power between Go and Uigard. One of them believed that this decisive battle would be an opportunity for Go to regain his footing and consolidate his position. Another side argued that the once passionate king now only cared about visiting the human world, abandoning his entire army in the midst of war. Some even half-jokingly suggested letting Uigard try out the throne first to acclimate himself to the position. Forced into an unavoidable situation, Go still refused to fight, claiming he no longer had any interest in empty power struggles. Despite this, Uigard raised his voice, accusing Go of losing his nerve, even sowing doubts in the army about his loyalty. At this point, Go retorted, saying that it was Uigard who had unilaterally ordered attacks against humans without approval. Realizing that even the most loyal remained silent, tacitly agreeing with the rebel, Go removed the ring, symbolizing the throne, and threw it forward, declaring his abdication abdication before everyone. No one expected a light kick from him to send Uigard flying out of the castle, a blow that required no magic, just an immediate reaction to an attack against Ulamina. Although he had clearly demonstrated who was the stronger, Go remained firm in his decision to abandon the throne. This action stunned the three heavenly kings and the inhabitants of the demon world equally shocked. Taking advantage of the chaos, the couple who had been captured by Uigard managed to escape safely. Back in the present, Go had nothing left but the desire to live in peace in the human world. Betrayed by his own subjects, homeless and without possessions, his only option was to turn to his old friend Fenris to request temporary shelter for a few days. Fenris understood the situation but still wanted to consult the house's residents. At that moment, the four girls who lived there appeared one by one, and only Balirosa showed strong opposition. Go then confessed that, after the abdication, all the intelligence forces under Ulamina had also departed, leaving him alone. He distributed the little money he had saved among them as a final gesture of gratitude. Ulamina was touched by Go's generosity, but also exasperated by his reckless spending habits. Fenris finally asserted that giving up the throne did not mean losing his character or ideals. He was no longer the demon lord, but he was still someone who had dreamed of building peace between the two worlds, and even as a temporary guest, continued to want to contribute to that goal. After debate, with the exception of Balirosa who remained opposed, the others accepted his stay. Go's presence marked a new turning point for Fenris's household, one that had never been ordinary. Since moving there, Fenris seemed happy to have another powerful ally. Although he had been the demon lord, he was now simply Go, whom Fenrir affectionately called Go. Still, integration wasn't easy. Blot firmly refused to let him touch the crops, and Biller wouldn't trust him with the horses, as all the demonic beasts trembled at the sight of him. Unsuccessful in the farm work, Go accompanied Fenris to the district. There, upon seeing the dragon scale shield, he recalled past battles. Although he had already faced the couple Ryuta and Fenris, he held no grudge, knowing they were only defending themselves. The three then chatted happily, which confused Ulamina, the demon knight who was watching closely. Not only her but also Balirosa, who walked away silently after witnessing the intimate scene. That evening, everyone gathered for dinner, except for the knight, who remained outside. When the dark sky brought stars, she went out onto the balcony to gaze at them, and was invited by Ryuta and his wife for tea. Ryuta explained that welcoming Go had been a decision everyone had discussed, even if it seemed abrupt. Fen added that everyone now felt like a family, each with their own joy. At this, Balirosa confessed her feelings, saying she longed to live with everyone, but couldn't erase the painful memories the demons had caused her in her childhood. Although she understood that Go and Fen weren't evil, her heart still couldn't accept sharing the same roof. Ryuta empathized, saying that Go hadn't come to cause trouble, but simply because she wanted a peaceful place. Fenris reminded her that if Bali had already taught her to cook and helped her grow, how could she be considered useless? The conversation ended with smiles. The next day, Balirosa announced that she accepted Go, albeit with a stain on her heart, but would remain vigilant. Go extended his hand to shake, but she replied that she would only do so when she truly trusted him. Fenris laughed, saying that perhaps one day the two would even walk hand in hand to a wedding altar. Meanwhile, the fugitives Reiner and the maid Saria were still running through demon territory. After stealing another treasure, they dreamed of selling it to earn money, bathing in hot springs and eating stews. Little did they know that, because of this, they became wanted. Even though he had been defeated by the former demon lord, Wuger remained rightfully seated on the throne. However, he had been facing many problems lately, as the demon army was continually repelled by humans, unable to advance. While Wuger raged that all the routes were filled with traps, Fufun reported that the situation was as dire as during the period of human resistance. Unable to accept the army's stagnation, Wuger roared and ordered more troops to the front line, regardless of the consequences. Ignoring the warnings, he took his anger out on Fufun and released it outside. The three generals below him seized the opportunity to mutter criticisms, calling him foolish and lacking in strategy, comparing him to the time of Demon Lord Go, when the army had flexible plans and did not descend into chaos. Now, the intelligence force previously managed by Olamina was disbanded, causing a drastic drop in troop morale. As the generals despaired, Fufun returned through the ceiling and suggested an unusual strategy to lift the soldiers' spirits, organizing group activities, specifically, a trip to hot springs. While the demonic side searched for ways to cheer up the troops, in the human world, the Fenris couple won a trip to a hot spring resort. What seemed like an opportunity for an intimate encounter turned out to be a group ticket, forcing them to bring friends. Although somewhat disappointed, they decided to take advantage of the opportunity to relax with friends. Upon arrival, the staff welcomed them warmly, distributing uniforms to each guest. Fen took the opportunity to inquire about the effects of the waters and was drawn to a special spring that aided fertility. Her thoughts soon turned to the vision of a happy family with young children. The 4 girls who contributed little went to another room and eventually encountered a familiar figure. Looking closely, they realized it was Wugard and Fufun, mingling with the tourists with the true intention of organizing team activities to cheer up the soldiers. Furthermore, Wugard's 3 generals were also present, carefully disguised to avoid recognition, wearing demon essence suppression amulets. Fenris's group of friends quickly noticed this and suspected his true intentions. Faced with this, Goff expressed an eagerness to greet his former subordinates. However, Fenris firmly warned that if anyone dared to disturb the peaceful atmosphere, they would not be forgiven. That night, the groups were divided into separate rooms. The Fenris couple had their own private space, and Goff was also alone to avoid creating conflict with his former companions. Everyone dispersed to explore the resort. Some of the girls happened upon an exhibit on human culture, dedicated to fertility symbols, and were curious to learn more. Meanwhile, Fenris seized the opportunity to pull her husband to a special spring, where he hoped to enhance the possibility of having children. However, the spring was divided into separate areas, so the two were submerged with a wall between them, only able to whisper. In another instance, 2 twin mages planned to train at night, using the body of a sealed witch. The plan quickly failed, as the witch reacted furiously and expelled them from her mental world. Meanwhile, others stumbled upon Wugard and his generals, who were sitting around eating and criticizing the human food, even though they devoured every bite. To liven things up, Wugard suggested a cultural performance. Fufun didn't hesitate to stand up and dance in a strange way, only to receive a fist bump of approval from his master. Next, it was the twin mages' turn to take the stage for a comedy routine. However, the performance was quickly interrupted when the demon essence suppression ring fell off, risking revealing their true identities. Even more surprising was the appearance at that resort of another familiar couple, who for unclear reasons watched everything silently. The market hero promised Saria that they would eat in abundance if they could sell the crystal they had stolen. However, before they could assess it, the stone glowed and began absorbing the surrounding demonic essence, causing the disguise to vanish. Immediately, a battle erupted between the 2 groups of performers, destroying part of the building. As everyone rushed to see, the crystal took over the body of the nameless hero, plunging the area into complete chaos. Meanwhile, Balarosa took the opportunity to speak with Ulamina. The knight asked bluntly if the girl had feelings for Gawain. Before she could answer, the crisis spread throughout the resort. A large entity formed of pure demonic essence emerged to destroy everything. The innkeeper tried to use amulets to stop it, nearly being crushed by a rock had Theo not appeared in time. He immediately ordered Fen to assess the situation while he took charge of restraining the creature. The attack spells had no effect. At that moment, Gawain realized the monster was not real, but merely condensed demonic essence, a sign that the region was being occupied by demons. Ulimina admitted seeing Uagard's group passing nearby, further fueling suspicions about the source of the danger. As everyone prepared to evacuate, Balirosa firmly opposed it. She believed that as a guest she couldn't continue to run away, much less let Ryuta endure everything alone. Despite her limited abilities, she still wanted to help, so they all left together. Ulimina muttered unpleasant words, but deep down she began to waver, and in the end, she too was dragged away along with Gawain. Upon their arrival, Finn was ready to face anyone who dared to ruin her vacation. Upon seeing Gawain, the demons greeted him as if reuniting with a relative, and Uagard immediately appeared to confront him, determined to settle the score with the former demon lord. As soon as the chaotic battles ended, the resort seemed to return to tranquility, but from afar Boza and the girls at Fio's house noticed something amiss. They rushed to warn the housekeeper, revealing that something unusual was happening on the roof of the main building. There, the confrontation between 2 generations of demon lords, Gawain and Uagard, had begun violently. Uagard opened the battle with a powerful spell that shook the entire region. However, Gawain remained steadfast, unharmed, determined not to lose. Uagard took flight, summoning a gigantic creature charged with demonic essence, and directed it at Ulamina. Even though she was targeted, the vice-general did not retreat, as Gawain countered the spell as easily as crushing a fruit. Meanwhile, Boza sought out Fenris to express his suspicions that Gawain might be involved in a dark plan, bringing the demons to the resort to cause trouble. After hearing the full story, Fio demonstrated absolute trust in his old friend, convinced that Gawain would never betray the humans. This trust stemmed not only from personal faith, but also from having witnessed Gawain's actions for the common good time and again. However, reality showed that Uagard had not yet given up. Although the giant creature had been defeated, he continued to deploy different tactics, trying to put his opponent at a disadvantage. Once again, Gawain responded with counterattacks, using simple principles of physics, harnessing the rotational force of his evasive movements to redirect the energy against the enemy. Surrounded and pressured, Gawain still maintained control of the fight. But if he wanted to end the duel quickly, he needed to remove the magic crystal attached to the monster controlled by Uagard. It was at this moment that Fenris entered the field. She used teleportation to approach with precision. Without sophisticated techniques, she threw a single powerful punch that ripped out the crystal, sending the servant Sayla plummeting from the creature's back, nearly losing her life. Fortunately, Gawain managed to save her in time, fulfilling his promise not to harm innocents. Soon after, Gawain handed the situation over to Ulamina, who didn't hesitate to question Uagard about the possibility of retreating. However, he had no intention of giving up, and prepared a final blow, forcing Gawain to advance to stop him. The young demon lord was captured just as he was pouring all his strength into a decisive attack, while the other generals merely watched, without intervening. Fufun, Uagard's faithful assistant, also became enraged after being hampered by Boza's cat and began using skills that forced her opponent to continually defend himself. The climax of the battle came when Uagard assumed his demonic black form, transforming himself to turn the tables. He pushed Gawain into a defensive position, attacking relentlessly, accompanied by taunts that insinuated that his enemy had lost his strength due to living in an emotional state. However, Gawain was undeterred. He unleashed a unique spell, created from the fusion of magic and human technology, capable of completely sealing Uagard's demonic essence, transforming him from a feared figure into a common being. At that moment, the resort staff sprang into action. An elderly woman pulled out amulets, and then the entire staff simultaneously activated sealing spells. The effect was immediate, immobilizing the entire group of demons. This was only possible because the resort uniforms were engraved with protective runes that automatically punished anyone who caused trouble. Thus, Uagard's army was forced to retreat, leaving space for those who truly deserved it. Fenris helped Fio scare away the small creature that had interrupted their vacation, while Sella stood motionless, crying helplessly. Thanks to Fio's restoration spell, the entire resort was restored as if nothing had happened. Everyone pitched in with the repairs, which made the staff not only grateful, but also deeply admire their special guests. When peace returned, everyone relaxed again. Fenris continued to think about having children, while Bali Rosa and Ulamina relaxed together in a pool. The little cat, who had always feared hot water, gradually warmed up after being forced into the water. The two girls eventually engaged in a silent competition when Bali Rosa's physical statistics were observed. Elsewhere, Villers and Barrett, after visiting the cultural exhibition on physiology, seemed to have satisfied their curiosity. The group gathered for dinner in a cheerful atmosphere. When Fio had the opportunity to chat with Go, they soaked in the hot spring and exchanged heartfelt words. Go admitted to being impressed from their first meeting, when he saw Fio emit an intense demonic essence without losing her cool, and always act justly to protect people. Go believed that between him and Fio, a bridge could be formed to a future of harmony between humans and demons. The night continued with a lively feast and celebration. The resort staff even sent Fenris a special gift, an eel-filled cake that was not only delicious but also symbolic, which delighted his mischievous wife immensely. Bala Rosa personally thanked Gawain for defeating the monster without harming anyone. He responded with only a sincere look, which made Ulamina blush furiously, like a wet cat. That night, everyone slept soundly. Only Fenrir got up to cover each person with blankets, and when all was quiet, went to find her husband. Ryuta asked his wife what she thought of humans. She frankly admitted that at first she thought them weak, but she couldn't help but learn from them. In fact, the only reason was love, and that was what made her willing to contribute to the reconciliation of the two races, thinking about the future of both. The next morning, as everyone was about to leave, Fenrir appeared radiantly, making everyone understand something, except Gawain, who didn't notice. Ryuta then used teleportation to take the entire group back home. Although some wondered why he hadn't done this from the beginning, everyone soon returned to their routine. Bono officially became a teacher. Haho mastered the use of cultivation magic and began planting vegetables, while Biller handled transportation for sales, creating a self-sufficient and efficient model. Gawain became interested in human weapons, researching manufacturing methods alongside Fio, seemingly preparing to open his own shop like him. The shield he forged greatly pleased Balarosa, who also announced that her coronation ceremony would take place soon. Although still concerned about the risks posed by the demonic side, Gawain reassured her, reminding her that Wugard had not yet regained his power. After the ceremony, Balarosa revealed that her father had been forced to abdicate and subsequently disappeared, and that she was now determined to rebuild a kingdom worthy of Ryuta's support. Meanwhile, the wanted posters of the couple who had stolen the treasure were still plastered everywhere. The market hero still dreamed of restoring a nation, and Saria continued to dig tunnels to hide beside him. Thus life in the other world went on, between achievements achieved and dreams yet to be fulfilled. And so we conclude the first part of this story. Like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more videos.